Hello and welcome to our assessment podcast where we go deep into the mysterious and magical world of educational assessment. I've changed that. I did say murky last time. Do you think that's a better change, Paul?
Yeah, I do.
My name... Good. My name is Sam Deno. I spent 6 years in the secondary classroom and I have spent the last 8 years in educational publishing and edtech. I don't see myself as an expert in assessment, but I sort of feel like I'm at the start of a journey. I want to become an expert and I hope that you join with me. I know somebody who will be joining me, and that's the aforementioned Paul Duffy. Tell us about yourself.
Thanks, Sam. So I have been working in primary education for over 15 years now, from EYFS through to Key Stage 2 as a teaching assistant, a qualified teacher, and even in leadership, where assessment has been a huge part of all of those. So let's go into the theme tune.
So let me just explain to you the concept of the podcast. These are short episodes that are designed so that you can use them for your professional development if you would like to, or simply to generate interest in an area that is often seen as burdensome for teachers. We do the research so that you don't have to. We'll jump into articles, blogs, reports, web pages, pull out some highlights and deliver them here in 10 to 15 minutes. And then at the end, we'll propose one key takeaway that might be a useful point for you to consider, or something that you could try implementing in your practice.
So Sam, tell me what exciting aspect of assessment you've been exploring this week.
So there is an associated blog with this, and at the very top of the blog I asked the question: are we on the cusp of a revolution within education in the UK? There is something in the air at the moment that gives me a distinct sense that radical changes that have been so desperately needed for decades may be just around the corner. Of course, people have thought this before, and there have been exciting turning points and mini revolutions over the years, but something feels different this time to me. We're surely nearing the sharp end of the teacher recruitment and retention crisis. Can it get any worse? Again, we've been asking that question as long as I can remember. So it definitely can get worse, but not without having a bigger and bigger impact on net educational outcomes and becoming damaging to the people that affects the most, and that's the government.
Well, it's certainly interesting, isn't it, that in spite of, as you said, the workload imbalance and the struggle to retain good teachers, that we still seem to be not really seeing much drastic change as yet. So I'm hoping that your insights into the future of assessment are going to hopefully shed some light on a possible solution here.
Well, then there is the digital revolution, which began for most of us at the start of the 21st century. But we're now 24 years into the 21st century, and what difference do we see in the classroom right now? Very little, actually. The bread and butter is still as it was in the year 2000. We're still on whiteboards. We're still using notebooks. But, and I think this is really the big thing, and we keep on talking about it, but with the advancement of artificial intelligence, as well as the post-mortem on education during the COVID pandemic, I think that at this point big change now does feel relatively inevitable. Do you think that's fair to say, Paul?
I think it's got to, hasn't it? Having been through all we've been through with the pandemic and seen, what is achievable, surely change is afoot. So looking ahead at the future of assessment then, what kind of possibilities do you think there would be in terms of change?
Yeah, good question. So I have been reading, as you have as well, we've both read, the Cambridge University Press The Futures of Assessment publication. It's a bit of research that they've done, and it's where a bunch of academics got together, modelled what the future of assessment could look like up until 2050. They kind of pitch ahead to 2050. And from that report, I've sort of pulled out 4 areas that I think are particularly pertinent to sort of what you and I are looking at, Paul, in terms of assessment in secondary schools and primary schools. And so let me run through those 4 bullet points then. So the top one is assessment could be built into digital teaching and learning systems. We're already seeing the rise of these teaching, learning, assessment, testing, diagnostic tools. There's a lot of them online already. And, you know, you and I both work for Twinkle, and Twinkle are sort of building their own version of this at the moment. Watch your space, everyone. So we're quite used to this, but as these systems become more and more intelligent, actually, which they will, because it's a competitive marketplace, and that will sort of generate more and more kind of people sort of developing it more and more. Ofqual, the DFE, are going to start to notice those things, and potentially they could end up replacing what we now see as sort of traditional examinations. That's the first one. Second thing that I've pulled out of it is stealth continuous assessment could replace examinations. And when I say stealth, it's actually that's their phrase. That I think it's in inverted commas in their piece of research. Basically, instead of having end of key stage summative assessments, we could, if that technology develops enough, we could go on to see that sort of diagnostic testing that happens in a classroom setting, quizzed in a classroom. We could go on to see that becoming used as the summative assessment. So basically what appears to be formative in assessment as a quiz in the classroom could be used as a continuous assessment method to measure how pupils are doing over the course of the year. Does that make sense?
Definitely. I mean, I can see that happening already. Having spoken with folk in Australia, I know their statutory tests, their NAP tests, are now online and digital. They've moved entirely away from paper-based. And I think it's likely that we will do, surely here in England as well. What's kind of the next big shift, do you think?
So this one feels like more of a stretch to me, but my sort of third thing that I've pulled out is assessment could become immersive and interactive. Can you imagine pupils in an assessment situation with headsets on, verbally responding to exam questions? Sounds like madness to me, but that is a part of what Cambridge University Press are proposing could happen by 2050, which granted is 26 years away. But imagine that. Imagine a world in which pupils can be assessed verbally and interactively. That surely builds actually a more kind of egalitarian model in which young people don't need to be the most academic in order to succeed. We all know that actually some pupils are much stronger verbally than they are putting pen to paper, and if we have assessment systems that reward that, then that would be brilliant in my mind.
Definitely. Much more sort of realistic for our students then as well, isn't it?
Yeah. And then the fourth thing that I pulled out was this sort of fascinating marketplace movement in which edtech companies could dominate the assessment landscape. So in this projected future, one of the big winners could be these huge edtech organizations. I've already mentioned that a lot of companies are now online creating teaching, learning, testing, assessment, diagnostic platforms. Actually, if there is a swing towards kind of the digitalization, if that's a word, of assessment, then that will favour those edtech companies above traditional exam boards if the traditional exam boards don't adapt and move on from the pen and paper traditional style of examination that they're kind of, at the moment, we've been stuck with forever. There you go. So those are I think the four big things that I've pulled out there.
Brilliant. So that's really interesting, isn't it? Some of the changes that I think we could see coming up. And I'm going to go back to kind of what you mentioned earlier. I think about the COVID pandemic certainly highlighted actually our ability in the world of education to transform our curriculum online, and therefore I think we could also do the same with assessments. So given that we've already almost been there and tested the waters, what do you think is kind of holding us back then from going completely digital, completely remote at the moment? What would you say are the main barriers?
Well, obviously cost implications. Money is always a big deal for schools. Can you imagine in a world in which pupils are entirely sort of being assessed on digital devices, be that computers, tablets, phones, whatever? Actually, we need to put a digital device in the hands of every in the hands of every pupil in the country. That's a lot of money, and are schools willing to part with that money? Is the government willing to part with that money? Further, if you then consider headsets on every pupil in every school in the country, I mean that's you can see why that's prohibitive at this
big
point.
outlay, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it could become more and more cost effective, which I'm sure it will, but we'll see what happens. I think there's a degree of pig-headedness from the education world. Actually, some people will see the system as not being broken in the first place. Now, I think it's fairly clear that the system is not fully operational, but some people will kind of want to veer away from any huge changes. And of course, there's the fear of technology, the fear of what dark paths AI might take us down, those sorts of things.
Well, certainly children nowadays are much more on digital devices, aren't they? So in a way, and even in the working world, I think, as you're saying, actually, we're better to almost change to that landscape so that we're matching the jobs children will go on to do.
So I think that a digital revolution in assessment could lead the way to a fairer, more egalitarian means of measuring outcomes. But maybe that's not what the major power brokers want. Maybe that's not what the government wants.
But it sounds like there would be a lot of benefits to going more digital, maybe even more immersive or remote. But certainly, I can't help but wonder, what are the key takeaways then from this? What can we do while we're in this time where we're waiting for digitisation to take over our school system?
Yeah, well, I think you've just hit the nail on the head there, Paul, with saying actually sort of embracing that digital change kind of at this point is important. Again, we are 25 years into a digital revolution, and many of us as educators haven't actually embraced much of those changes, which are now so much upon us that actually it seems kind of not sensible not to even look at those, explore some of those ideas. So from an individual perspective, we can still access on exciting online quizzing tools. Sort of there are sort of free or premium versions out there. So I think that sort of as classroom teachers, that's a really good kind of way to kind of start to envelop that sort of learning in classrooms. Get the laptop trolley into the classroom as much as possible, or wherever you get your laptops from. I think actually getting pupils digital as much as possible. Why not? And actually building that into your own personal curriculum. There you go. That's what I've got, Paul.
Amazing. So some really good insight into where we could end up in the future, how things could change, and some really useful steps for now. So if you want to know more, check out the blog, which I think is going to be linked below. Like and subscribe and all that sort of thing. And we look forward to hearing from you and responding to your comments as well. And thank you for listening. And that's bye from me.
And from me. Bye for now.